Welcome back. We're going to be talking about chapter 6 of the book of Daniel. This is like the most well-known story about Daniel in the whole Bible. You've had it if you were attended Sunday school, or even if you've just heard about it not in church. There's the story of Daniel in the lion's den.
I'm sure everybody's seen the VeggieTale version too.
Right, and there's a VeggieTale about it. Who would miss that? So, but even though it's one of the most well-known of the stories within the Bible about real characters in the Bible, real people, it's the account of Daniel in the lion's den. But have you ever stopped to think that Daniel spent only one night in the lion's den, but he spent a lifetime, his whole life, from boy to 17 until about 90 in the palace of pagan kings. And it was more dangerous to live in that palace than to spend one night in the den of lions. The lions couldn't touch him. There was Nebuchadnezzar and Nabonidus, Belshazzar, Darius the Median, and Cyrus, who were all pagan men, and Daniel was in constant danger during all this time. However, he had the privilege of leading some of these men to a knowledge of the living one true God.
Yep,
so that gave him that opportunity.
Yep, because he held on to his faith and never wavered from his faith and trust in God.
Right, which is the thing that we should most glean out of this book of Daniel is his faith, his constant, and unwavering faith, even as a young child.
Never afraid to let people know either.
Right, right. So we're going to go through chapter 6 here and see what this message has for us today, because it is a living story that just the Bible is the same then as it is now for us, and in the future it will always have deep meaning to us in our lives today.
Okay, so we're going to start with verse 1, chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius. Darius was the current ruler for when this episode happened too, after Belteshazzar. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one whom was Daniel. The satraps made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Now at that point, he's already making enemies because he's making the other guys look bad.
Right, and there's always people who are going to be jealous of someone who's doing better in life, and that's what they were doing.
Yep, and at this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." He was so steadfast in his devotion and his faith in God that everybody knew it, and that was the only way that they could ever find anything. That they figured that they'd have to trick him some way in order to find something wrong with him.
Isn't that a great testament for him? Just that alone.
Yep.
The fact that they knew they wouldn't find anything to fault him with, so they were going to have to turn his own religion because he felt so deeply about it against him.
I know.
That's quite a testimony.
It is. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, in our workplace, we have people that, they're out to get you because they want to go and, climb that corporate ladder. And if you're doing a really good job and they find something wrong and they can't find anything, they'll nitpick to find something. And the only thing they could find that would be his little chink in the armor would be his faith in God.
Right, right.
So we are now on verse 6. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." They always do that when they're getting ready to suck up. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now that's pretty specific there.
Right.
Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So the king Darius put the decree in writing. So when they did that, didn't you say at one point they put them like on tablets?
Right. This was not just a little piece of paper and they went and put it on a copy machine. They didn't have any of that. They literally, this were on tablets that were actually placed in the centers of different areas so that everyone would see them. And they did that through their kingdom. It wasn't just, right there. And Babylon, this was the largest of the kingdoms at the time. And so they put those little pillars around that announced it.
Kind of like the whole...
They were serious.
Yeah, that whole thing about it's not engraved in stone.
This was engraved
This
in
was
stone.
engraved in stone.
And they were planning this. It's like planning a hit before it happened. I mean,
Yeah.
they knew what they were doing. They
They-
were coming up with all the stuff to trick him into, faulting himself. I mean,
Yeah.
my favorite Bible verse ever is 1 Peter 5:8. And it's, be sober and be vigilant, because your adversary the devil is like a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. So we always have to be ready
Yep.
for something to happen in this way. And this was actually Satan working through these men to try to trick and devour.
Yeah, because he's always trying
Daniel.
He's always trying to trick the devout,
Right.
and the faithful.
Right.
I mean, because let's face it, Lot was in the same thing, and he asked God, "Let me tempt him," and Lot held steadfast, even though he loved not Lot, Job.
Job. I was going to say Job too, but yeah, Job.
Yeah, not Lot. Sorry,
Right.
that's a different story altogether.
He knew Job was so dedicated and
Dedicated.
so devout to God,
Yeah.
and that was the only way Satan could have done that.
Yeah.
Tried to do it, but he didn't succeed.
And then he came back and got even more. Was more. Everything that was taken away was more restored to him.
Right.
So now we are on verse 10. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. This is something that Daniel did all the time.
Right. He didn't let it alter one step, and I like the way they pointed that out there. It didn't alter him at all. He read it, went straight and did what he always did, was to go and get on his knees and pray.
Yeah, and these men knew that he did this 3 times a day, so they knew exactly where they were going to find him.
Yeah.
So they went to the king, little tattletales, and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, this is in verse 13, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Daniel had a lot of favor with the king.
He'd already made such an impression on the king.
Yep, he made such a pressure. He was trustworthy. Anything that the king told him to do, he would do and get it done well. It truly distressed him because he waited. He thought to find some way to save him up until sundown. He had a time limit.
Right.
So, and that was when he had to make that happen.
Yeah, and this is because of the Medes and Persians being in control at this time. Nebuchadnezzar would have been able to change his own law.
Yeah.
This was a Mede and Persian thing, and absolutely could not be changed. One should have been declared.
Once you had it written in stone.
Posted like that, yeah.
written in stone.
True.
Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. Now, they starved lions before they put people in the den.
They prepared him for him. Sure did.
Yep. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. So the king really wanted Daniel to survive. He really did. He didn't
Do you
want
suppose
him.
he had faith that that might happen, or just a hope or a vague remembrance of the things he'd heard about Daniel, maybe,
Yeah.
and so he really thought there was this opportunity, and what a testimony that is,
Yeah,
too.
I mean, especially since he says, "May your God, whom you serve, continue." So he knew
Yeah,
he was
so he knew he
extremely
was powerful.
faithful, and
Yeah.
he knew. And I think you're right. Hearing all the stories from back when Nebuchadnezzar
Would have made an impression on him.
I think
So
so.
it was already, God in there,
already planted that seed.
right.
Yep. It's amazing just by works, just by living your life, how much of a difference it can make on a person. So this actually goes to prove that how you live your life.
Right. Well, I love that saying. It's teach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words,
Yes,
because it's your actions
did-
that are going to make the most of an impression on people.
exactly, because people respond more to actions than
Right.
words sometimes.
Right.
Okay, so verse 17, a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. They wanted to make sure nothing was going to happen and that he would not get out.
Yeah.
And I think the other guys, the other people that put their signets on there, I think that was a way to make sure that the king wasn't going to renege either, because they knew how much the king liked Daniel.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be so.
When the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep, so he was extremely distressed.
Right. Yeah.
At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And I know he was probably sitting there going, come on, please say, please say. And everybody's going, no.
No way. Yeah.
Yeah. And Daniel answered, "May the king live forever." And I'm sure the other guys went, uh-oh,
I wonder what's going to happen with that.
we're in trouble now.
Yeah.
May God, my God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I done any wrong before you, your majesty.
I like that how he points that out too. I didn't even do anything that.
Yep.
Yeah. That would have caused this.
Yep. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. That's kind of like whenever they took Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego out of the furnace. Not a hair out of place, nothing
Didn't
was
smell like
singed,
smoke,
didn't smell like
nothing.
smoke or anything.
Yeah.
Let's see. No, verse 24, at the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. That's pretty serious. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every languages in the earth, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So he went through the Medes and Persian rule.
Yes.
Made it through both.
Well, and starting out with Babylon too. Yeah. So Daniel's position was secure. He maintained it to the end of his life, which came during the reign of Cyrus. And it was Cyrus who made the decree permitting the Jews to return to Palestine. And this part concludes the strictly historical section of the book of Daniel. After that, we're going to be studying more the visions and prophecies that Daniel had. That
happened during this
Right.
first 6 chapters during his entire exile in
right,
Babylon.
this whole time he's in this foreign land, and he's having these visions and dreams. And this is not a chronological study, but it is now we're going to go to the prophecy part of it, and that'll be next time when we do
Chapter
7.
Yeah, when Daniel has a dream about 4 beasts.
Right, so join us then.